You're recovering from your past. You feel like life is taking your last. At your dreams you're starting to laugh. It's time to put down the emotional bags. Tune in to the Simply Self podcast. The Simply Self podcast. Tune in.
You are listening to the Simply Self podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sonia, aka Pastor Greer. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing 1 2 3 4. We're gonna do it again. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing 1 2 3 4. Testing 1 2 3 4. Well, welcome to the Sheer Truth. Oh God, wait a minute. This is not the Sheer Truth. Welcome to the Simply Self podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Sonia, aka Pastor Greer. I'm not editing that out. That was funny. Anyway, it's been an interesting couple of weeks, and I gotta tell you what's going on, because today's episode is entitled In Sickness and in Health. Baby, a lot of you know that portion is part of traditional wedding vows, in sickness and in health. Well, we have experienced some more sickness. Cliff, Alonzo, and I, we ended up getting COVID. This was all three of us having our first experience with COVID, and it was very ghetto. It was very scary because our son ended up in the hospital. And for those of us that are parents, we understand how heartbreaking it is to watch your child suffer, and watching Alonzo struggle to breathe. Whew, it was terrible, y'all. So what happened was, this was a couple weeks ago now. It started like on a Tuesday, where Cliff was starting to feel a little funny, and he knew that there were some other people at work that were sick, and he was thinking maybe possibly it was the flu. And at first that's what it seemed like, because I remember he told me that he was a little sore, and I said, oh, that sounds based on the other stuff that he was saying that he was feeling, it sounded like he might have been coming up on the flu. So I was like, oh boy, here we go. And he had coughed himself hoarse. So by Wednesday, he was hoarse and he was, feeling bad or whatever. And that Thursday, I was supposed to be recording a podcast with Ken Stearns of The Jar. Shout out to Ken Stearns and his daughter Danielle. They're very cool people. I was going to record an episode of The Jar with him. And by Thursday morning, I woke up, my throat was sore. And I was like, oh man. So I let Ken know how I was feeling. And this was like early in the morning. I let him know how I was feeling, and we were like, okay, we can do it the next day, because he was in town still that next day. And so we planned for it to be that next day, that Friday, that we were going to record the episode. As the day progressed, within hours, I was hit with fever, chills, body aches. I mean, it was crazy, right? And usually with the onset being so quick, I assumed as well that this is the flu that we're dealing with. So as I was starting to feel worse and worse, I was masking up while I was holding Alonzo and praying that he didn't experience any symptoms or anything like that. Well, Thursday went on, and as the evening went on, and I was feeling worse and worse and had the fever and everything, I of course called Ken and was like, there's no way we can do it tomorrow because I'm starting to feel it. And he was very cool about it, and wanting us to be okay, wanting us to be safe and everything. That Friday morning we wake up and Alonzo is wheezing. So we're like, oh man, here we go. So we said, well, let's call the doctor and make an appointment. The appointment was for like 1:45. By like 12, his breathing was even more sounding like he was congested, even more sounding like, he was having a time. So his appointment came around. We took him to his appointment, and we had checked his temperature before we left for the appointment. He didn't have a temperature, so we were like, okay, well, maybe he's just experiencing some of the respiratory symptoms. Hopefully, maybe they can give him a breathing treatment and maybe he'll be okay. We get to the doctor. We're in there. They give him a breathing treatment, and then his breathing is starting to get worse. This is the worst he's ever sounded. And we're starting to get nervous, starting to get scared, like, okay, what's going on? They give him Tylenol because he ended up having a fever. It's 101 and something. He had a fever, and then his breathing was getting worse. They gave him the breathing treatment, and then this wasn't his regular doctor. Another doctor in the office came in and said, well, we're gonna send him to the hospital. We're gonna send him to the ER, and he's gonna have to ride in the ambulance. Thankfully, the doctor's office is like a stone's throw away from the actual hospital building. When I tell you the feeling that I felt, and the sinking of my stomach that I felt watching my baby being put on a stretcher, because we had to put him in his car seat and then put him on the stretcher, and being loaded into an ambulance. Oh, that was terrible. That was absolutely terrible. Mind you, we still are thinking we have the flu, and which is dangerous enough. The cold, even any respiratory thing is dangerous for a baby. So we get to the ER. We're in there for a while, and he's getting hooked up to things, and he's getting his I think he got the IV put in before I went ahead and left, because I was thinking they're probably going to keep him overnight. So I'm going to go back to the apartment and get some stuff for overnight. And we were still thinking that, this is the flu. We're going to be able to, Well, as I'm here at the apartment gathering stuff, Cliff texts me and says, Alonzo has COVID and croup. And the croup is, a respiratory situation that was caused by the COVID. So I'm like, oh man, I text him back. I was like, no. So then he tells me to go ahead and test, because I think we had talked about me taking the test before he sent me the text. Took 2 COVID tests. Both of them came out positive. So obviously, if he has COVID, then more than likely we have it too. I brought a test to the hospital for Cliff to take. His was also positive. So all 3 of us had COVID. And Cliff and I went 3 years during this pandemic without getting COVID that we know of. I don't think either one of us would have been asymptomatic if we had gotten it beforehand, especially judging by how our bodies reacted this time. Now, mind you, Cliff and I are both vaccinated and boosted. I got my booster shot actually while I was pregnant. So, we were hoping that if, God forbid, we ever did get it, that our symptoms would be lessened. And I believe that, for whatever y'all want to believe about the vaccinations, whatever, okay? And I had talked about this before. The reason why I decided, because I wasn't going to get it at first. Cliff went ahead and got it, and I wasn't going to get it at first until I saw more of what was going on with people, and you're never really sure anyway. And I hadn't had a vaccine like that, and I was concerned. I had never even had a flu shot. A relative of ours, and I won't share her name or anything, but those of us that know us, they know, who I'm talking about, because I don't want to break HIPAA laws or anything. A relative of ours got COVID while she was pregnant. They ended up having to take the baby. Thankfully, he was fine, but she ended up being in a coma for a couple of months, I think it was. She was very sick. I mean, to the point where we weren't sure if she was going to make it, which was very sad. Thankfully, our girl came back, and she's fine now. I think she still has some lingering things, but she's fine now. No, serious things that are keeping her from, being active and stuff like that. But it scared me because this happened during the time that we were trying to conceive. And I decided when we got back from Florida for Christmas, it was Christmas of 21 that we had gotten back, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and get my vaccine. Got the vaccine, and like I said, I had the booster while I was pregnant. I believe that definitely helped us not be in such bad shape, because thankfully our child was not hooked up to any supplemental oxygen. He didn't have to be intubated or anything like that. He took the breathing treatments well. He had an IV for IV fluids. He was given Tylenol and different things when he had a fever. So we are very grateful, because our story could have been so much different. He spent 2 days in the hospital, and I was with him. And this was the thing that was sad and kind of tripped me out. Mind you, the three of us were sick. Cliff wasn't able to stay because it was only COVID patients can only have one person in the room. So we're on the children's floor with Alonzo. He has to come home. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm staying in the room with Alonzo. And mind you, I'm spiking fevers almost the entire time we were there. I'm coughing, can't really breathe very well. I'm taking my albuterol, all this stuff. And people were saying, well, why don't you go downstairs and, or no, why don't you see if they can treat you? First of all, we're on the children's floor. They can't treat an adult on the children's floor. So what I would have had to do was go downstairs and spend God knows how many hours in the ER, and I would have been away from my child. And that wasn't happening. I didn't want to be away from my son. So I ended up staying up there with him. So then when we got home, thankfully Dad, shout out to Dad, Cliff's father, he's my father too. He came and spent 3 days up here to help take care of Alonzo while I continued to recuperate. Thankfully, Cliff was able to go back to work, and he was able to, kind of still function, and my functionality has come back about 70%. Still very tired. I think he's still tired too. He's still dealing with a lot of fatigue, but he don't want to be saying nothing because he don't want me to worry about him. But I can tell he's still dealing with fatigue. And of course, like you hear, I'm dealing with the coughing. The asthma has definitely been affected, and I'm having to be more careful with how much air I take in, or I'll start coughing. And so our first experience with COVID was with our son, and thankfully I'm glad that we all got sick together so that we weren't passing stuff back and forth to each other, because that would have sucked. So we all got sick the same week. We all, it was rough, y'all. This beautiful baby that couldn't tell us how he was feeling, was suffering clearly. And just hearing, if your baby starts to have like a barking seal sound and they're obviously struggling, that's definitely an ER visit. Now, when we made the appointment for the doctor, he was wheezing, which of course nobody wants to hear the child wheezing, but we were thinking that this was something that a doctor's visit could solve. Well, as things progressed, and things progressed very quickly, he went from wheezing to the barking seal sound. So if you hear that, don't pass go. Don't collect $200. Just go straight to the ER. But it could have been worse, and it wasn't. And that's just another thing that my husband and I got through with the help of the Lord, of course, the help of the prayers of the people that knew about what was going on. And then once we got home from the hospital and everything, and later on I was able to share what we had been through. But child, it was rough. And I just thank God that it wasn't worse, because there are people, we both have had family members on both sides of our family that have either been deathly ill from COVID or have actually passed from COVID. So we just thank God that it wasn't worse than what it was. And if you're on the fence about, I'm not talking to the ones that are staunchly against the vaccine. I'm not talking to y'all. But if you're on the fence about getting it, and you maybe are still like I was back in 21, waiting to see how things were going to go and how people were going to react to, consider it, because COVID is still very real out here. And our son, we could have been telling a very different story about our child. So just wanted to get on here, and this is why there was no episode last week. Whew. Value life. Your life may not be exactly what you want it to be right now. You may not be living the life that you planned or the life that you dreamed of. But value the life that you have, please. Because in an instant, within hours, your life can change. Within hours, things can, you just never know. So please value the life that you have. Please. Life can be so much better, but it can also be so much worse. And we definitely experienced that. And we're just grateful. So grateful. That baby has been through so much, and he's a blessing. So thank y'all for the love and the support, and continue to pray for us, and we continue to pray for y'all. And I'm gonna go ahead and skedaddle, because you have been listening to the Simply Steph podcast, hosted by Persephone Sonia, aka Pastor Greer. Love y'all. Alonzo is so loud. I don't know if it's picking up on the mic or not, but he's in there and that was another thing too. Just to let you know. His cries were so weak. That broke my heart. Because our son is very loud. Most children are loud, but our son is very loud. So for his cries to be so weak, oh, that tore me up. So if you're on the fence about the vaccine, consider it. Okay? All right, love y'all. Bye. And no, this is not sponsored by the CDC. This is just me sharing my thoughts. Okay? Love y'all. Bye.